everyone, and welcome back to Lingovia English. I'm Sara, and it's really nice to have you with us again for another episode where we explore the world while improving our English at the same time.
And I'm Ethan. Thanks for joining us today. In this episode, we're going to talk about a very important international day that is celebrated around the world every year on March 8th, International Women's Day.
Yes, it's a day that focuses on recognizing the achievements of women in many different areas of life, including education, science, politics, art, business, and many other fields. But it's not only about celebration. It's also a moment to reflect on the challenges that women still face in many societies today.
Exactly. So in today's episode, we'll explore where this day originally came from, why it continues to matter in the modern world, and how people celebrate it in different countries and cultures. And of course, as always, we'll learn some useful English vocabulary along the way.
That's right. So let's begin by looking briefly at the history behind this day, because understanding the background helps us understand why it became so important. International Women's Day actually has its roots in the early 20th century. At that time, many women in Europe and North America were beginning to organize and speak out about their working conditions, their rights, and their opportunities in society.
Yes, and the situation back then was very different from what many people experience today. In many countries, women did not have the same legal rights as men. For example, they often couldn't vote in elections, and many professional careers were simply closed to them. So groups of activists, workers, and social reformers began organizing meetings, protests, and campaigns to demand fair pay, safer working conditions, and the right to participate in political life.
Exactly. And one very important moment happened in 1910. A German activist named Clara Zetkin proposed the idea of creating an international day that would focus on women's rights and equality.
Her idea was presented at an international conference of women activists, and it was received with a lot of enthusiasm. Soon after that meeting, the idea spread quickly, and the first celebrations of the day took place in several European countries the following year.
Over time, the meaning of the day continued to evolve. Today, International Women's Day celebrates the achievements and contributions of women, but it also reminds us that gender equality is still something societies are working toward.
Right, and that idea, that progress takes time, is an important part of the conversation.
Let's pause for a quick vocabulary moment, because there are a few useful words in what we just discussed. One important word is achievement. And achievement is something you succeed in doing, especially after effort, practice, or hard work. For example, graduating from university or completing a difficult project can both be considered achievements.
Another key word is equality. Equality means that people have the same rights, opportunities, and treatment. So, when we talk about gender equality, we mean that women and men should have the same chances in education, employment, leadership, and many other areas of life.
Now, if we look at how International Women's Day is celebrated today, we can see that the traditions vary quite a lot around the world. In some countries, people give flowers or small gifts to women in their lives, for example, mothers, teachers, colleagues, or friends, as a way of expressing appreciation and respect.
In other places, the day is marked in a more formal way. There might be conferences, public discussions, educational programs, and campaigns focused on women's rights and leadership. Universities, organizations, and even governments sometimes organize special events to highlight the contributions women make to society.
That's right. And of course, in today's digital world, social media plays a big role. Many people share stories about inspiring women, talk about important issues, and celebrate progress that has been made over the years.
That leads us to another useful word from today's conversation: contribution. A contribution is something that someone gives, such as time, knowledge, ideas, or effort, to help achieve something or improve a situation. For example, you might say, her contribution to science changed the way people understand the world.
Before we move on, Ethan, I'd like to pause for a moment and think a little more about why International Women's Day is still so relevant today. Sometimes when people hear about international days like this, they assume it's mainly symbolic, almost like just another date on the calendar. But in reality, the conversation behind this day is much deeper than that.
Yes, that's a really important point. When we say something is symbolic, we mean that it represents a bigger idea or message. In this case, the day represents more than 100 years of social change, activism, and progress. But it also reminds us that progress rarely happens quickly.
Exactly. Social change usually happens gradually, step by step, sometimes over many decades. That's why many organizations, schools, and communities use this day as an opportunity to start conversations about education, leadership, equal opportunities, and the many different ways women contribute to society.
And when we say contribute, we mean to give something valuable, such as ideas, effort, knowledge, creativity, or leadership, that helps a community or a society grow and move forward. Every society depends on these kinds of contributions, even if we don't always notice them immediately.
You know, something I find really interesting is that the meaning of International Women's Day can feel a little different depending on where you are in the world. In some countries, the day has a very political tone, with marches, public speeches, and discussions about rights and policies. In other places, the atmosphere is a bit different. It's more about appreciation, gratitude, and celebrating the women who influence our daily lives.
That's true. For example, in some countries, people give flowers to mothers, teachers, co-workers, or friends as a simple gesture of appreciation. In other places, universities and organizations might organize panel discussions or public talks about women's leadership, education, and innovation.
And that variety actually reflects something important, the global nature of the day. People around the world recognize it and talk about it, but they express the meaning of the day in ways that fit their own culture, traditions, and social priorities.
Exactly. And speaking of global traditions, Sarah, I think this might be a perfect moment for our quick quiz.
Yes, I like that idea. If you're listening right now, try to guess the answer.
All right, here's the question. When did the United Nations officially begin celebrating International Women's Day? Was it A, 1945, B, 1975, or C, 1990?
That's an interesting one. Let me think about it for a moment. The movement itself started earlier in the 20th century, but the United Nations became involved later.
Exactly. So take a few seconds to think about your answer.
If you guessed 1975, you're correct. That was the year the United Nations began officially celebrating International Women's Day, which helped bring global attention to women's rights and opportunities.
And since then, the United Nations has helped promote international discussions about women's rights, education, health, economic participation, and leadership opportunities.
Moments like this show how international organizations, local communities, and individuals can all play a role in raising awareness and encouraging positive social change.
Exactly. When we talk about social progress, we often think about movements, campaigns, or organizations, but sometimes the story becomes clearer and more inspiring when we look at individuals, people whose ideas, courage, or discoveries change the world in meaningful ways.
That's a really good point. Individual stories help us understand history in a more personal way. When you hear about someone's life, the challenges they faced, and the achievements they reached, it becomes much easier to connect those stories to the bigger picture of social progress.
Right. And when we talk about women's achievements, there are many inspiring examples from different fields: science, mathematics, education, and activism.
For example, think about scientists like Marie Curie. She won 2 Nobel Prizes for her groundbreaking research on radioactivity. That was an extraordinary achievement, especially at a time when very few women were allowed to work in scientific research.
Yes, and her discoveries helped change the way scientists understood energy and matter. Just as importantly, her determination and success opened doors for future generations of women who wanted to work in science.
Another remarkable example is Maryam Mirzakhani. She was an Iranian mathematician who became the first woman in history to win the Fields Medal, one of the most prestigious awards in mathematics.
That achievement was especially significant because the Fields Medal is often described as the highest honor in mathematics. Her success inspired many young students around the world, especially girls, to pursue studies and careers in mathematics and science.
And of course, we can also mention Malala Yousafzai. She became an international voice for girls' education and later received the Nobel Peace Prize for her activism and advocacy.
Stories like these remind us that progress is often shaped by individuals who challenge expectations, overcome obstacles, and expand opportunities for others. But even today, challenges remain. In some parts of the world, girls still face barriers when it comes to education, and women may experience discrimination in the workplace. In other words, even though progress has been made, there are still many areas where equality hasn't been fully achieved.
That's exactly why awareness is so important. Awareness means recognizing that a problem exists and paying attention to it instead of ignoring it. Events like International Women's Day help bring these issues into public conversation so that more people understand them and think about possible solutions.
Another key word connected to this discussion is empowerment. Empowerment means giving someone the confidence, the tools, and the opportunities they need to make decisions about their own life and future.
Yes, and education is often described as one of the most powerful forms of empowerment. When girls receive education, they gain knowledge, they build confidence, and they open doors to opportunities that might otherwise be closed to them.
Exactly. And that's why many organizations around the world focus on empowering women through education, healthcare, leadership training, and economic opportunities.
At the same time, it's also important to remember that this day is not only about global issues or international organizations. It's also a day to celebrate the everyday women in our lives, mothers, sisters, teachers, colleagues, and friends, who influence us in meaningful ways.
That's a really good point. Sometimes when we think about history, we only remember the famous names we read about in books. But the truth is that millions of women contribute quietly every day to families, communities, workplaces, and schools.
Exactly. Teachers inspire students to learn and grow. Doctors and nurses care for patients. Artists share ideas that influence culture and creativity.
And speaking of culture, International Women's Day is also a time when art, literature, film, and media highlight women's voices and experiences.
You might see art exhibitions, film screenings, or panel discussions where people share stories about women's lives, achievements, and challenges.
And that brings us to a question for our listeners.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. How is International Women's Day celebrated in your country?
Do people organize public events? Do schools talk about important women in history? Or is it more of a day when people show appreciation to the women in their families and communities?
Take a moment and share your experience with us. Write a comment and tell us how people celebrate this day where you live.
Now, before we finish today's episode, let's take a moment to review some of the key vocabulary we used.
Okay, let's quickly review some of the words we talked about today.
First up is achievement. An achievement is something you succeed in doing after effort or hard work.
Next, equality. Equality means that everyone has the same rights and opportunities.
Contribution is something someone does or gives to help reach a goal or make a situation better.
Then we have awareness. Awareness is understanding that a problem or issue exists and paying attention to it.
And empowerment means giving someone the confidence, tools, or opportunities to take charge of their own life.
These words are really useful, not just for learning English,
but also because you can use them when talking about real-life situations, important issues, or people who inspire you.
Before we wrap up, here's a little challenge for you. Think of one woman you really admire, maybe someone famous, or even someone in your family or community.
Exactly. Don't worry about being perfect. Just have fun with it and use the words in a way that feels natural to you.
We'd love to see your examples. Share them in the comments.
And if you enjoyed learning English through today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Lingovia English.
Thanks so much for listening. Today really reminds us that women everywhere make a difference, big or small. Isn't that inspiring?
Absolutely. And once again, happy International Women's Day to everyone around the globe.
See you in the next episode. Keep learning, keep practicing, and stay curious. Bye.